Hi, Dana. That's right. Well, this gunman who had a rifle and multiple magazines inside of that mall was shot and killed by that 22-year-old Indiana man who's now being hailed as a hero.
It was a very, very fast response, but I'm going to tell you, the real hero of the day is the citizen that was lawfully carrying a firearm in that food court and was able to stop this shooter almost as soon as he began.
Over 200 parishioners were in attendance, including 71-year-old Jack Wilson, a reserve deputy sheriff. In the video, you see the gunman there wearing a dark hoodie sitting in the back pew. He then gets up, walks to the back, and appears to say something to a deacon, and then pulls out a long gun, aims, and begins to shoot. The attack lasting just 6 seconds. Wilson, who is in charge of church security, pulls out his own gun, fires a single shot, and kills the gunman before he could harm anyone else.
And I said, oh my God, somebody's shooting. I ran to my safe, where I keep my gun. I grabbed a rifle out of the gun safe. I grabbed a handful of ammunition and started loading my magazine. And then I saw a man in a black tactical helmet with a dark shaded helmet on, and obviously looked to me like it was bulletproof vest. And he had a pistol in his hand, and we exchanged gunfire.
Armed civilians stop more active shooters than are actually reported. The reason they're not reported is because they don't fit the narrative. Welcome to another installment of the Connecticut Gun Bench. Today's video is brought to you by P.A.N. Firearms, LLC, P.A.N. Firearms for NRA certification and multifaceted gun training. You can reach us at 203-300-6343 or use our website at www.panfirearmsllc.com. As always, there'll be a link in the description box. And if you like my channel, like my content and what I do here, you can support me with the link in the description box. Everything is appreciated. Let's talk about this. And I came across this article at the Washington Examiner, and it's written mostly by a Paul Bedard, and he's using information from research done by John Lott. And if you've been in the gun, the politics side of guns, you know who John Lott is. He's definitely a Second Amendment advocate and activist. But he wrote an article saying, it's pretty much stating that more active shooters are stopped by armed civilians than is actually being reported, which means it's actually being undermined when it comes to attention given to when an armed civilian stops an active shooter. You saw the three clips in the beginning, once again, examples. The only reason that these were actually given national airplay is because of how huge they were. They could not be ignored. And quite honestly, at the bottom line, no matter what, these news media outlets, it's all about clicks, money, and so forth. So they had to report on it. But it happens a lot more than they will actually talk about. Now, I want to come into here, and this is the actual article from the Washington Examiner, and this is based on new research, but over 60% of active shooters stopped by a good guy with a gun. A large percentage of active shooter incidents are thwarted by armed citizens who sometimes don't even fire their weapons, but those cases are no longer counted under President Joe Biden's pro-gun control policies. According to just released data from the Crime Prevention Research Center, 41% of active shooting incidents were stopped by armed civilians. And there's a link there. I'll try to get this into the description box because there's links here that take you to the actual data, so they're not just talking out the side of their mouth. Outside of so-called gun-free zones, which a lot of these happen in, because there's a reason why a lot of these shootings happen in gun-free zones, which barred illegal carrying of firearms, over 63% of active shooting cases were ended by an armed civilian, according to the center. The new data from John R. Lott Jr., the former Justice Department Senior Advisor for Research and Statistics, are his latest to challenge undercounting and bias in government reports on shootings and backup efforts by the Second Amendment and police groups to encourage people to carry firearms. If you remember, I did a video, and this was well over a year ago, but the CDC at the behest of anti-gun groups, under-reporting how many times guns were used in a defensive situation, because according to these anti-gun groups, it hurt their cause. Literally, that was their wording in emails that they were passing back and forth between themselves and the White House and the CDC. But Locke continually updates his data to include all the cases, including those the government overlooks or misclassifies to counter media reports. That is rare for civilians to put down active shooters. His information is especially critical since the Biden administration stopped counting defensive actions by civilians. We wonder why. Because it goes against his narrative. That's why. Following the Sandy Hook school shooting in 2012, Wayne LaPierre, executive vice president of the National Rifle Association, famously held a press conference to decry the shooting and offer a solution. He said, quote, "The only way to stop a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun." Liberal anti-gun groups and media allies mock the comments, but they have been unable to come up with a willing solution to stopping often deranged shooters. Lots of data show that LaPierre was likely correct. Of 440 cases he cited from 2014 to 2022, 157 active shootings were stopped by an armed civilian. By comparison, the FBI cited fewer cases, 302, and even fewer thwarted by armed civilians, 14. The FBI data from 2014 to 2022 have led the media to call the interventions rare. Lott said the FBI data often misclassifies cases, do not dig deeper than skimpy police reports, or wrongfully identified a civilian with a gun as a security guard. And then you saw that little clip there. A monster entered a Texas church. That was one of the clips I played. To commit a mass shooting, took Jack Wilson 6 seconds to kill him. The average police response is 9 minutes. Jack was armed to save the lives of friends and family from absolute evil. And then, of course, there's a Twitter link there. But, quote, "Evidence compiled by the Crime Prevention Research Center shows that the sources the media relied on undercounted the number of instances in which armed civilians have thwarted such attacks by an order of more than 10, saving untold number of lives. Of course, law-abiding citizens stopping these attacks are not rare. What is rare is national news coverage of those incidents. That's why I do that series I call You Won't Hear It in the Mainstream Media, because they do ignore stories of defensive gun use by law-abiding citizens. Why? Because it doesn't fit the narrative. If the person who's committing the crime gets away with it and kills 4 or 5 people, they then gleefully tack on that mass shooting total to tell you, oh, we've had X amount of mass shooting. It's only been so many days in the year. It's truly a twisted math that they're doing. But lots in the report shared with Secrets on Friday said, the FBI reports that armed citizens only stopped 14 of the 302 active shooter incidents it identified for the period 2014-2022. The FBI defines active shooter incidents as those in which an individual actively kills or attempts to kill people in a populated public area, but it does not include those it deems related to other criminal activities such as robbery or fighting of a drug turf, he added. Those types of shooting, however, have recently been included in cases of mass shooting by several media outlets because it fits the narrative. It boosts the number to basically tug at the emotional strings of people to say, hey, we've had X amount of mass shootings, but they don't tell you what those, they don't break them down. Because when they do, it's a psychological game. We've had 302 mass shootings, and then they try to correlate it to Sandy Hook or Uvalde or San Bernardino. You know, that's how the game is played. But they're taking any incident, gang beef, drug turf wars, idiots out on the weekend, and combining it all together. It's basically is a psyop for all intentional purposes. But an analysis by the CPRC identified a total of 440 active shooter incidents during that period and found that an armed citizen stopped 157. A previous report looked at only instances when armed civilians stopped what likely would have been a mass public shooting. There were another 27 cases that we didn't include where armed civilians stopped armed attacks, but the suspect didn't fire his gun. Those cases are excluded from our calculations, though it could be argued that a civilian also stopped what likely could have been an active shooting event. The person is going to cause trouble, pulls a gun, somebody pulls a gun on them, they don't fire a shot. That's pretty much what that encompasses. But the FBI reported that armed citizens thwart 4.6% of active shooter incidents, while the CPRC found 35.7%. Now, This is a really good article. And I just wanted to get as much information as I could. So I'm going to go ahead and go bring this here and get out of that. But the gist of this article is that defensive use of handguns by law-abiding citizens is grossly underreported. And it's not so much grossly underreported because we made a mistake or, we just didn't know. No, this is a deliberate action because they don't want the public to start thinking, or get into the mindset that people with a gun prevent crime. They don't want that. They just want you to believe that guns are the reason for crime. That's why it gets underreported and why articles like this, which probably won't get much traction because, once again, it doesn't fit the narrative, are very, very necessary. And people like John Lott doing this work is incredibly necessary to us as a community. But let's get down to nitty gritty. The mainstream media, for all intentional purposes, are political or the media wing of the Democrat Party and the left agenda. A majority, 90%, at least. So the left wants gun control and disarmament of the civilian population. The media is going to go along with that. I'm going to give you now an example outside of firearms that just happened recently. If you don't know, the GOP in the House have pushed forward for an impeachment inquiry, which means it's an investigation to potentially bring an impeachment vote to the floor. And don't let anybody tell you any differently, because once again, if you listen to the left-wing media, they're spinning this thing as insanity. But to the point of it, as soon as that GOP, McCarthy, announced that inquiry, the White House sent a letter or a memo to the editorial leaders of all the major outlets, telling them to scrutinize the impeachment inquiry because they said, quote, it's all lies. It's like that. Okay, then if it's all lies, why do you feel the need to reach out to the media outlets unless you're in bed with them and they're willing to do what you want? If you listen to them, what do they all say? Oh, well, this impeachment inquiry, there's no evidence, it's all lies. They're all saying the same thing. This is the same idea. When it comes to guns and gun ownership, the media, for the most part, repeats and parrots what the left and the left agenda tells them to say. That's why I found this article interesting and I wanted to bring it up and talk about it. People defending themselves with guns happens a lot more than they're reporting. The reason they're underreported is because it will paint a narrative that makes their position of guns are bad look stupid. That's basically it. But let me know what you think. As always, you can leave your comments in the comment section below. And as always, any statements of violence or statements that lead to violence will be removed. Please like, share, comment, subscribe. Don't forget to hit that notification bell so you're notified the next time a video goes live. I'll see you on the next one. Peace.